ಬನ್ನಿ ಕೇಳಿಸ್ಕೋಬೇಕು ಅಂದ್ರೆ you should come to the front. ದಯವಿಟ್ಟು all coffee growers kindly come to the front and occupy the seats because you will not be able to hear the voice beyond this. This session is about the quality management for small farms, and we have our esteemed speaker, Alvaro Gaitan, a microbiologist of Los Andes University with a PhD in plant pathology from Cornell University and studies in genomics, bioinformatics, data mining, genetic resources, and intellectual property. And since 2016, he has been the director of scientific research and technology of the National Federation of Coffee Growers of Colombia. So please put your hands together. Let's welcome Sri Alvaro Gaitan to kindly come over to the stage. Console. Here. Friends in the console, there are some digital receivers who have come and given it to me. So if you don't want, I'll take it home. Audience, please come to the front. All of you come to the front. You won't be able to hear sitting there. If you are interested in the session, please come in front of the tape, the red tape what has been put there. Please come in front of that, you can hear. So beyond that, you cannot hear. So kindly come forward and take your seats, please. Hinde iroorge kelisodilla. Kindly come in front of the red tape and then you will be able to hear.
Ready? He's ready? Okay. He's working? Ready?
Yeah, ready.
All right. Okay, hello everyone. Let me see. I'm going to invite people from the back to come over here so we can get a little bit cozy and you can hear me, which is the main part of today. We're still having trouble with the volume from here. Okay, let's see if you can. What about now? More or less? Okay, let's give it a try and let's get it started. All right, so again, it's my pleasure to be here again in India. Wonderful place, wonderful people. And today I would like to bring to you a great salute from the people from Colombia. And of course, have a great, good afternoon for every one of you. So, okay, yesterday we have my boss here talking to you about quality of Colombian coffee. And all the time we are talking about, for Colombia, as one of the main source of top quality mild wash coffees. And you will say, okay, these guys are talking about Colombia, quality, coffee, but you know, that's something that we keep all the time in our hearts. It's like a mantra. It's like all the time we're thinking about quality, 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 and that means that we today are one of the main providers of top quality coffee and washed coffees around the world. It's about 12.6 million bags, which basically means that every second, 1,000 people are having Colombian cups, around the world. So that's something that we just having it, from the inside in our hearts. And today, what I would like to do is to share, what are we doing, why we have, and hope that some of you will pick some ideas or some interesting facts that probably you can bring to here and use it as well in India. All right, so let's get started. So this is going to be a little bit of a long talk, so I'm going to divide it in 3 parts. So we can have like 3 sessions. We're going to have some questions, room for some questions, and then we're going to have some final remarks, all right? So let's start with the fundamentals. And probably you guys are thinking, well, what is happening in Colombia? What do they have? What are they doing in order to have this top quality coffee? And hopefully you had a chance to try some of the coffee that we have in our stand here next to us. So let's start working in the first part with the fundamentals. What is in there? So the first thing that you may think is, well, what about plant varieties? What do they have in Colombia for cultivation? So let's take a look at what do we have. And here I will be talking about Arabica coffees all the time, right? So what do we have in the genus of the Coffea genus around the world? So today we know that, let me see if I can point this from here. Well, today we know that we have about 140 species of Coffea that are present around the world, but only 3 of them are actually cultivated, right? One of those is Coffea canephora, which we know mostly as Robustas, the Robusta type. The other one I saw in here, you guys have it around the coffee plantations, is the Coffea liberica. And look at this. At some point, one wild species, which is Coffea eugenoides, was crossed naturally with Coffea canephora, and that's where we got Coffea arabica. So Arabica is like a mixture of 2 different species, and we have it right there. So these 3, canephora, Arabica, and liberica, are the main species that we are all cultivating around the world. This fact, the Coffea arabica, is coming from this part from Ethiopia and South Sudan, but in general, as we saw here many times, canephora and liberica are coming also from Africa, right? All right, so what happened? I mean, the Arabica started there in Ethiopia, and they started to use Arabica for drinking. That's something that is relatively new. It happened just in the year 575, right? So coffee plantations, some coffee plants were moved into the Arabian Peninsula, and then they moved all the way through here to Asia. Obviously, in the middle of that, you have this story of Baba Buddha bringing, some seeds in the bird, things like that. But basically, some very few plants were moved around the world, and they started to grow all over again in some other places. So we had this tradition of coffee from India, but then some plants moved to Europe, right? They went to these botanical gardens in Amsterdam and in Paris. And again, somebody took some few plants and moved them over to the Caribbean Sea. And that's where we started to have coffee in America. In the year 1730, we started to cultivate coffee in Colombia, and also some of those plants moved to Brazil. That is the root of what we know today as Typica, right? That's one of the main varieties of Coffea arabica is called Typica. There is a second root, which is from the Arabian Peninsula going into the Reunion Island in the ocean there, and then it came to Brazil. So basically what we have in there is the second main variety that we cultivate around the world, which is the Bourbon variety, right? So that basically means that from all the diversity that you could have in Ethiopia, just few plants were moving around the world and arrived to America or to other places where Arabica is cultivated. Okay, so there you have the Arabica. Some of those are the cultivars, Típica, Bourbon. Then you start to find these crosses that people began to do naturally, right? In Brazil, for example, they crossed Típica with Bourbon, and they got what they call Mundo Novo. But also, people were finding some mutants, some plants that were not similar to the other ones. And in this case, Típica and Bourbon are tall varieties. And all of a sudden, they found this short plant that they call Caturra, right? So Caturra is a mutant that is coming from Bourbon. And they started to make more crosses there. So Mundo Novo with Caturra, that's a cross that came and produced Catuai, which is another popular variety in many places. And from the side of Típica, we also had these other mutants, these variants. For example, the Típica, the yellow Típica, which is a fruit that is not red, but is yellow color. Or we have some other dwarf varieties like San Bernardo, or big fruits like in the case of Maracojipe. Those are mutations, little changes that are all happening like in the same family. So basically what we see here is a family tree that at some point was affected by the coffee leaf rust. And that was a disease that was taken all over the place. So people began to look for resistance against the coffee leaf rust, and that's where we got Coffea canephora and Coffea arabica. They crossed together in an island that is the Timor Island, and it came the Timor hybrid. And Timor hybrid is a nice plant because it's resistant to the coffee rust, so people began to use it to cross it with the other varieties that you see there to produce some new stuff, like these ones that we see here. So basically, in many countries, they started to do this crossing, and they came out with the Catimors, for example. That's some lines of the Timor hybrid crossed with some dwarf varieties, but also, for example, the Sarchimors, or the Colombian varieties, Colombia, Tabi, Castillo, Senicafe, or here in India, you guys also did Kaveri and Chandragiri. So again, when you look at coffee plants right now, they are all like sisters, brothers, cousins. They are really close together, and there is not much variation among them all, right? Okay, that was the first thing. So when you look at plant varieties, what we are cultivating in Colombia, you can say that is very similar to what is cultivated here in Central America or in Brazil, right? Let's look at the second factor, the weather conditions. What is happening in Colombia with the weather? So this is what is happening around the world. Let me see again, if I can point out. There you go. So basically, what you see here is what is called the coffee belt. It's where coffee is cultivated around the world, right? So you have north of Mexico, well, the south of Mexico, Brazil, you have Ethiopia, you guys right here, south of China, north of Australia. In all those places, you're going to find coffee plantations, right? Now, the thing is, what is different? What you see here is a phenomenon that is called the intertropical convergence zone. What is that? It means that the humidity from the northern hemisphere kind of collides with the humidity of the southern hemisphere, and you have this rain front that is pressing around the world. So at the beginning of the year, in January, this rain front is in the south part, and then it starts to move to the north. And then in July, it reaches this part. So what it means that for many countries here and here, you have dry periods and you have rainy periods, right? But look what happens in Colombia. It's like the two fronts are like really close together. So in Colombia, we don't have dry periods and rainy periods. We have rainy periods and periods where we have more rain, right? But we don't have dry periods at all. So let me show you this. Don't mind at the numbers, because I just want you to take a look at the colors, right? So these are the countries from the north to the south in America: Mexico, Guatemala, Colombia, Brazil. So you can see that at the beginning of the year, in Brazil, you have a little rain, then it's dry, then rain again, right? If you go to Mexico, it's going to be the other way around. You start with a dry period, then the rainy period, then you have dry again. Look at Colombia. It's rain, 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 rain until the very end, right? It's like raining all the time. Of course, you can see here we have a couple of Colombias here. This is the north part of Colombia. The north part of Colombia behaves like the weather in Mexico. And in the south part of Colombia, what you have is something similar to what you have in Brazil. All right? So when you go and check, Colombia is a rainy country. That's something that is not happening in other parts, right? So then you go and take a look at the weather conditions in Colombia, and basically what you have is like 3 coffee zones in the whole country. One is in the south, where you have the main harvest in the first semester, because the rain is coming right from there, right? The rain front is there. Then you have a second zone, which is here in the north, where the rain happens in the second semester, and that's why you have the harvest in the second semester. And look at this. In the central part, we have harvest in both semesters, in the first one and in the second, because the rain front goes over and then comes back. Okay, so what it means for us? It means that when you are looking for fresh coffee, which is something that happens in the quality business, the whole year round you're going to find fresh coffee in Colombia, because it's either coming from the south, from the north, or from the middle part. So basically every month we're producing 1 million bags of fresh coffee to the world. That's something that is really nice. But on the other side, it means that we have conditions for a problem like the coffee rust. The whole year is raining. So we have a lot of pressure from the coffee rust because the conditions are there for the rust to come out, right? It also means that in the same branch, you can find at the same time fruits, flowers, red fruits, ripe fruits, overripe fruits. Why? Because the plant sees that rain is coming all over the place. So the harvesting has to be really selective. You have to go in there and pick up very carefully what is in there. So it's very expensive to do the harvesting, okay? All right. It also means that in those places where we have only one rainy season during the year, we should have something similar to what you guys have here. We must have agroforestry production systems. Why? Because we get a lot of sunshine, we have a lot of temperature, and we have many months in which we don't have like a lot of rain. It's not like a dry season, but we don't have a lot of rain. But in the central part of the country, we need to have something like this, because we have a lot of clouds. We don't need to have shade trees because the clouds are already blocking the light. So we have less sunshine, we have less temperature, we have more precipitation because the rain is passing twice, and we have a water deficit that is really short. So basically that means that we need to have these 2 production systems, some in the north and the south, and the other ones in the center part. All right, and the other thing is we have coffee growing on the mountain sides, right? So basically you can find coffee from maybe a little bit over the 1,000 meters up to 2,000 meters in altitude. We can do that because we are located at this latitude, right? 1 degree north, 11 degrees north. If you come to India, coffee is a little bit farther north, so you cannot have coffee at these altitudes, right? You can have it over here. All right, so that's another difference that you can find. All right, so basically, those were 2 main differences or 2 conditions that we have in Colombia. Let's go with the third one. It's the farm environment. So basically what we have is a production system that is done by small farmers. We are going to talk a little bit later about what is a small farmer in Colombia, but basically we have 500,000 families cultivating 150,000 hectares, right? You make a division, this number divided this number, and it's going to be 1.7, 1.5 hectares per farmer, right? Also in Colombia, the farmers are living right there, close to the coffee plantations. They have labor going on in there, about 2 million indirect jobs. But also, since we have small farms, we have to maximize the use of the land. So we try to have coffee with, for example, beans and plants like maize or some cases with plantains, right? But in some times of the year, we can actually do this. But also, because of in some places we need shade, we also have to combine coffee plantations with shade trees. Sometimes we need temporary shade, so we have to use it in case, for example, this year that we have El Nino, it means that we're going to have conditions that are a little bit hotter than usual. And also, since we have to preserve the soil, remember we are in the slopes of the mountains with a lot of rain, we have a lot of chances for erosion. So basically, we have to protect the soil with other plants that are in there, which are not weeds in the sense that they don't compete with coffee, but they are helping this ecosystem to survive, right? So basically, you have a whole picture that is really complex. We have it's a system that is really rich in natural resources, full of complex biological interactions, and we have lots of variations across the country. Now, this looks very similar to coffee plantations around here. You have a lot of trees in there, a lot of different species. It's a very rich environment, right? So basically what we have here is we have to focus on research that is under the control by the farmer, right? We cannot control the price in New York, we cannot control the exchange of the dollar, but we can control whatever is happening in the farm. So we focus a lot and we do a lot of work on this integrated management of the production systems so we can have resistant plantations, resilient to the changes of the climate, and of course, profitable plantations. All right. So we're going to go into the fourth condition or the fourth characteristic that we have in Colombian coffee plantations, which is the farmers' organization. Since 1927, coffee farmers in Colombia, they are organized in what we call the National Coffee Growers Federation, right? It's an association that has been there. It's going to have 100 years in a couple of years. And basically, if you take randomly 100 farmers in Colombia and you check how much land they have, you're going to find this. 23 of those farmers are going to have less than 0.5 hectares, right? Now, 30 are going to have between 0.5 and 1 hectare, and 37 are going to have between 1 and 3 hectares in coffee. So these are the guys that they are not living out of coffee. They just have coffee as a way, one of the income in their families, right? Because we calculate that you need to have at least 5 hectares to be a full-time coffee farmer. So those are these ones. 6 of the farmers are going to have between 3 and 5 hectares, and 3 of them are going to have more than 5, and finally only 1 farmer out of the 100 farmers is going to have more than 10 hectares. So that's the dimension where we're talking about small farmers, okay? That's what we're doing here. All right, so what they did, these farmers, they got together and they decided that for every pound of coffee that was exported, they were going to take 0.066 cents of a dollar and put it together in something that is called the National Coffee Fund. So what can we do with that money? We can do only 4 things. First, we can do scientific research. So the farmers in Colombia are the ones that are paying for the scientific research, right? So what we do later, once we do the scientific research, also the farmers are paying for the extension service. We have about 1,200 extensionists across the country. But also, we have something that is called the purchase guarantee. What it means? It means that in every town, the federation has a place where they buy coffee at the reference price. So everybody else buying coffee in that place has to pay a little bit more than what the federation is offering, right? So which is a good thing to preserve the prices at the maximum. And also we do the promotion worldwide of coffee. So you have the famous Juan Valdez, which is also paid by the coffee farmers. So all of these things, we have them ready, working in there for or using this National Coffee Fund, which comes from the coffee farmers. All right, so basically what we do, we have this classic model of technology transfer. Whatever we generate here in research, which is done by Senicafe, we transfer that to the extension service, and the extension service goes to the coffee growers. And also we have a feedback from the growers and the extension service back to Senicafe to do the research. So everything that we're doing in research is being pushed by the extension service and by the coffee growers. All right, so this is a picture of Senicafe. We are located at the center of the country. And just to mention a couple of things, one is one of the orders that we have from the farmers is we should work to develop active breeding programs, right? So basically what it means, we should generate varieties that have high productivity, which is very important for the small farmers, but also that have this high proportion of Supremo beans. They want to have beans that are larger than usual, so this is requested by the roasters. And also it should have excellent cup quality. That's something that we are keeping an eye all the time on that, because this is important for our consumers. And finally, we want to have durable resistance to the rust. And this is very important for the environment. And I'm going to show you why. So we have this seed production system that is working, also paid by the farmers, in which we produce about, per every year, 100 tons of seeds that we deliver for the farmers, right? So they can renovate, change varieties. But when we do that, we are putting 180 million new plants every year in there. So we are keeping the plants, the plantations young, and we are saving 1 million liters of fungicide because these plants are resistant to the coffee rust. We don't need to apply any fungicide. We are saving 1 million liters. That is very important for the environment. And finally, for the farmer, it means that they are saving $230 million just because they don't have to do the control of the coffee rust, all right? So that's very important for us. So basically, at the end, what we do, we try to do research, innovation, and transfer that information to the farmer in order to provide this technical change for better and sustainable coffee production. The way we see it is, and you see here Juan Valdez and the mule that is with him all the time, is that we want to keep the tradition of very good quality coffee, but also put that coffee producer into the highest technology possible. In this case, the guy is flying in an airplane, all right? So this is the purpose of what we're doing here. All right, so I've been telling you a lot of things. I want you guys to tell me a little bit about you in this first part, because I just finished the first part of my presentation. So I'm gonna do a clapper, not yet. It works like this. If the answer to the question that I'm gonna make to you is yes, you just clap once. Okay, is that understood? Let me see, let's try again. If the answer is yes, you have to clap once. Is that understood? All right, good. Since I'm a scientist, I'm gonna do a test to see if it's working. So this is my question. Has India the best cricket players in the world? There you go, it's working. Okay, so what I want you guys to tell me is this. Now that you know some things about Colombia, and you know, of course, the things about your farm, which is the main difference that you guys see from there and here? So the first thing is, you think that the main difference is between your farms and Colombian farms is the plant varieties that you guys use? All right, that's the one. What about the weather conditions? Yeah, it looks a little more. What about the farm environment? Yeah, it's pretty similar. That's what I think. And finally, what about the farmers' organization? Okay, good. All right. Thank you, and I appreciate your answers so I can have a feedback from you. All right, so I'm going to move into the next part, and now we're going to get a little bit deeper into quality, right? So for now, I'm going to talk about the standard procedures, what we do with coffee in Colombia. Now you know how we grow it. Now let's see what we start to do once the coffee is harvested. All right, so let's talk. The first thing that we have to think here is cup quality is a multi-dimensional concept. You cannot just talk about quality in the cup. There are many things going on in there, right? One of those is the chemical quality. What kind of chemicals are in there? The other one is the physical quality. You can have a really nice cup, but if the beans look ugly, I don't think nobody would like to try them. The other thing is the microbiological quality. What kind of microorganisms are there when you are drinking your coffee, right? And finally, something that we take care of, the most is the sensory quality. What is the flavor? What do we feel every time we drink coffee? Okay. So for this, we have to keep this in mind, right? The first, coffee plants, they accumulate chemical compounds in the seeds. So they start to grow, they check on the sun, they check on the environment, they start to produce some chemicals, and they save those chemicals here in the endosperm. So basically, that is what is happening to any coffee plant, right? But then what happens? We collect the fruits, we prepare the beans, and the sum of those components, or these compounds, or their precursors, are the ones that are going to stimulate all our senses, right? So whatever is happening in the plant over there, they are accumulating the chemicals, and then we are the ones drinking coffee and feeling all the chemicals in our mouth, in our nose, right? Okay. So basically, when we check at the chemicals, they are affecting the beverage in these 5 components. In the fragrance, which is how the coffee smells because I put any water. In the aroma, which is what happens when the water is there and starts to release these other volatiles. But of course, in the acidity, I can feel it here in my tongue. In the body, if it feels like milk or if it feels like just water. In the sweetness, which is very characteristic of Colombian coffees, and in the bitterness, right? So when you check, you know that you start to see that there are some chemical compounds that are responsible of this. Some organic acids that are present in the coffee bean, some chlorogenic acids that are also in there. They affect acidity. In the body of the beverage, the lipid fraction is very, very important, the tocopherols. They are involved in transportation of the aromas and the flavors. Then you have the bitterness. Here, one is very important, caffeine. It's the one that is providing that flavor, but you also have trigonolene, for example, and some proteins. In the fragrance and in the sweetness, well, in the sweetness you have the saccharose and the fructose that are giving you this sweet flavor, and the volatiles are very important because they are going to give us later this fragrance and this aroma, okay? So basically, that's the kind of compounds that are being accumulated in the coffee bean. So when you start to check carefully, you find some molecules that are there that are characteristic, but look at this. They have certain values, and they can vary a little bit from one to another. So basically, when we check our coffee beans and we start to check for the acidity, we check for these kind of acids that are present in there. Also in the body, look at these chemicals that are causing this feeling of the body, and this is the variation. In some cases, the variation is just a little bit, and then it's going to produce these big changes. Also, we find in the bitterness, look at this, caffeine. Caffeine is something that changes very little from one plant to another, from different environments. Sweetness, saccharose is very important, and in the fragrance, trigonolene. So this is just a little sample of what is going on in there, right? Every day, scientists go and they study, and they find that there are particular molecules that are really in charge of having this impact in our senses, right? But this is something that we're still trying to understand. All right. So basically what we have some of these chemicals that are kind of fixed. They are difficult to change from one place to another, from one variety into the other one, from one process into the other one. So, but some of those other chemicals, they are variable. You can actually manipulate them a little bit. You can change them. And they change because of the weather and because of the environment. So I just want to mention that because that's important, and that's the reason why we have something that is called the denomination of origin. So you want to talk about quality. One of the first ways to talk about quality is, okay, what about the coffee that is grown in my region or maybe in my farm? Is that different from coffees from other places? And the answer is yes, it can be. So basically what we do is you take some coffee beans, green coffee beans, and you put them in this machine, which is called near infrared spectrometry. And basically what what the machine is doing is checking for what kind of chemicals you find in that sample. And it gives you something like this. It's kind of a signature, right? So every sample that we put in there provides us this particular signature. So what we do, we analyze those signatures, which are telling us what is the composition of the chemicals in there, and we start to take samples from from different parts of the country, and look at this. We started to find that there are like 3 main groups that you can see here. We put them together, and which groups are those? We find that the north part, plants accumulate some chemicals in there, and the machine is noting that, right? Noticing that. So the same happens with the south, and then we find with the central part. So basically, depending on coffees growing in this region, we can read that out of the machine. But not only that, if I go deeper, I can find that coffee from specific regions in the country, like for example, Huila here, Huila is here. So it means that I can show, if somebody asks me, your coffee is coming from Huila, I can have this test and tell, yes, I have a chemical proof that my coffee is coming from there. So basically, this is important because every time we talk about denomination of origin, somebody would like to certify that. And the thing is, you guys can do it, can do this, and you can have that here too for sure. And this is the result. I would like to have this. Why? Because I want to get a little bit more price for my coffee. If I can show that my coffee comes from this particular place, probably I can get some extra value out of that. So one good news is you have a chemical way to demonstrate that this is actually happening. All right, so that's what I wanted to mention there. The other part is how the chemicals can change. Well, they can change depending on the farming, on how you do the farming of coffee. And this is something that I would like you guys to keep. If you don't remember anything of what I talked today, please try to remember this. Quality and productivity, they go hand by hand. You cannot work quality forgetting productivity, right? Why? Because productivity is critical for all these investments that you have to do when you want to reach better quality, and productivity is important when you do selection of your material in order to just keep the good stuff by the end. So if you don't have a good productivity here, and then you got here your coffee that you collected in your farm, you start to remove the ugly, you remove the bad, you remove the noisy or the mean, then you end up with just a little bit of coffee, although with a very good quality, but what can you do with 2 kilos, right? You need to have a lot of coffee here to do this selection and end up with a huge, huge amount of good quality coffee, all right? So I want you guys to remember this for today. So for the farming practices, we're going to talk about them today. I'm just going to mention, well, it's good to have the plants in a really healthy way. They must be healthy plants to produce good coffee beans, right? The other one, you must have the right planting planning. In our case in Colombia, we like to have high densities, 7,000 plants per hectare. This is something that is the way we handle things here. We have to renovate plants. We don't like to have old plants, for example. We have to provide the proper water supply in the cases that the plants need them. Do the correct fertilization. If the plant is not having the good food, how do you expect to have good beans, right? You need to have that connection. All right. But also you have to preserve your soil. Otherwise, this business is going to end really soon. So we want to have good soil preservation. We use water a lot, so we want to provide to return the water in a clean way to the environment. Have a lot of biodiversity conservation, because we know biodiversity is helping us to produce good coffee and for sure have a fair and safe labor. So those are the things that you would like to do in the farming, but every time you do this, the plant is feeling that we are getting good beans or not, right? Okay, so basically we had these variable conditions where we can change the composition in the weather, in the environment, in the farming. So let's go into the harvesting, right? Harvesting and processing. All right. So I'm going to summarize, to start here, what are the basic steps for processing of coffee. Okay, the first one is just to have dry coffee. dry cherries. 2 steps. You do the harvesting, you dry the cherries, right? When you do that, you produce natural coffees, what we call the natural coffees. All right, they have special characteristics, but there is not much that you can do to change things in the processing. You just do the harvesting, you do the drying, right? The second one is what we call the semi-washed. You do the harvesting, you introduce a step, which is the pulping. So you remove this pulp, the cascara, and then you dry your coffee. So you just let this mucilage to stay on the top of the coffee bean and to dry along with the coffee bean, right? So these are the ones that we call the honey coffees. And then we have the final ones, the ones that are very famous in Colombia is the wash coffee. So again, you have the harvesting, you have the pulping, but then you go into the mucilage removal. And there's where the world starts to change, because you can do it physically with a machine, remove the mucilage really quick, or you can do a fermentation and allow the microorganisms to work in there and to remove the mucilage, right? Then after that, you have to do the washing to remove whatever is left, and then you dry it. So you see, these are the steps. They are becoming complex and complex, but basically here, I'm going to focus on this one, because this is the one that we are still using in Colombia, which is very characteristic for us, okay? So what you do with these steps that we're showing here, these ones? Well, we took a look at the whole country, what the farmers were doing, and we came up with something like we call the 7 practices, the 7P. So this is something that, you know, instead of giving a lot of recommendations to the farmers, we decided to say, no, wait a second. We're going to concentrate everything we are going to tell to the farmer is going to be condensed in 7 practices, all right? So we're going to take a look at the 7 practices. What is that? All right, let's start with practice number 1. Practice number 1 says, you must have less than 2.5 green cherries during harvest. So this is what is happening to us. We have a lot of green cherries getting in there. Then the maturation, the ripening goes on. We have some green cherries over here, left. And then the time comes where you have to go and do the harvesting, right? So then you still have some green cherries around here. You have to be sure that you have less than 2.5%. That's when you start to feel astringency. That's when you start to have problems with the cupping, right? So what you do to do that? I mean, it's like everybody's harvesting, everybody's busy. How do you control that? Well, the simplest way is something that we call these mediverdes, which is like the green measurer. So it's a specially designed cup that you just go and take a sample from whatever harvesting is happening, and then you take and you put all the cherries on the table, and you count how many of those are green. And this is very simple. If you have between 1 and 5, you are doing well. Perfect, you can continue doing the harvesting. But if you have more than that, 6, 7, or even worse, then it means that problem is coming. Then you have to tell your people that the harvesting is not going well, right? So this is very important, so you can control things from the very beginning, all right? So this is the first practice, less than 2.5 green cherries during harvest. All right, let's go with the second practice. We have to separate batches for processing. This is something that is very common, right? I go into the farm, we start to do the harvesting, we do the pulping, we start to do the processing, and then all of a sudden, somebody else comes with more coffee, with more pulping, with more processing, right? So sometimes we say, okay, you know what? Put this one on top of this one, and let's process all together. That is not the way you should be doing. So what we do is we try to have separate tanks for different fermentations. One fermentation here, the other fermentation in other place. And then when you dry the coffee, you shouldn't dry everything at once. You should try to separate from different days or from different batches so you can control what is happening there, right? This is for solar drying. This is for machine drying, mechanical drying, all right? Because you see here, you put separators, you keep things apart. So this is important. Just keep a record of how many batches you have, and you can handle them at different times. Okay, practice number 3. Remove cherries and beans of low quality. This is critical. So you collect your coffee, you have your harvest, and then you come and you see that there are many things in there, many cherries, that they don't look really good. They are going to cause trouble, right? So for a small farmer, what can you do? We have this method that is called the 2-can system. You have one normal can that you fill with water, and this other can that has little holes at the bottom, right? So what you do? Basically, you take your coffee, you put one can inside the other, right? Then you pour your coffee over here, and you let in the water for the floats to show up. Those floats, you have to remove them. You see here with the sieve, you start to remove those floats, and then you end up only with the good coffee at the bottom, right? Then you can remove this can, dry it a little bit, and you can reuse that water for the next batch. That's when you have very few amounts of coffee coming in, but basically you have to remove those floats because they are causing a lot of trouble later in the fermentation process. Look at this. This is without float removal. This is with float removal, right? So you start to see a difference here in the quality of what you're going to put into fermentation. Now, if you have a bigger farm or a bigger harvest, then you can have a system like this. So you have these recipients, or we call them tolvas, which are the ones that are going to receive the coffee. You're going to move it over here, and here you have the water. So basically, the good coffee goes to the bottom, the floats remain here, and then you recover this, and you start to do the pulping. This is very important, right? This is something that we notice that is going to make a big difference at the end. All right, let's go with the practice number 4. You have to clean and calibrate the equipment. This is something that probably sounds really obvious, but when we go into the farms, we notice that many farmers, they don't do a proper cleanup of the pulping machines, for example. So there are a lot of beans or pulp that is being decomposed inside the machine. It's causing trouble. It's causing these ugly flavors. Or you have to do a proper maintenance of the equipment. You have to calibrate the equipment. And look at this. Where you dry your coffee, you have to clean it up. You have to keep everything tidy, right? So basically, this is very important, just to clean everything in your equipment. And then we go for practice number 5. This is a question that is really critical, right? I take my coffee, I do the pulping, I start the fermentation. The question is, when do I stop the fermentation? How do I know that the fermentation is done? If I don't do it at the proper time, the coffee is going to come up with problems, right? So the traditional method in Colombia was to take a stick and put it in there, in the mass, and take it out. If the hole remains, you're good. If the hole doesn't remain, you're not good. Chances of having the wrong time for fermentation, 75%. So you have a big chance to miss the good point. So what we came up with, well, people start to talk, you have to check for the pH or the acidity, or you have to check for the Brix degrees, or you know what? We tried to do, and we came up with this idea, which is called Fermaestro, which means fermentation master. So how it works? Fermaestro is this cone, it's a plastic cone. When you're going to start your fermentation, you open the cone, you fill it with the coffee to the top, and then you close it, and then look at this. You put the Fermaestro inside the mass. And then, once in a while, you go there, you take the Fermaestro, and you check if the coffee is at the same level or if it's going down. Well, normally, the mucilage has been degraded, the level of the coffee is going down, and when the level of the coffee comes to a mark that we have here, it means that the coffee is ready to go, right? It's very simple. You don't need any equipment. You just need to check how the level of coffee is going down until it reaches this part, and that's where you should stop. Chances of failing with the Fermaestro, 5%, right? So most of the times, 95% of the times, you're going to have good fermentation going on in the tank. All right, the next one, practice number 6. Remove the mucilage with a proper washing. Well, that's something that is also important. We try to use as little water as possible, but you have to clean the coffee in a good way. So your coffee is going to look great, and you can go into the drying phase, right? So we came out with this idea. Look, many years ago, we used to spend 40 liters of water to process 1 kilo of coffee. We were able to come down with this kind of machine to just half a liter of water to process the same kilo of coffee. So you reduce a lot the water that is contaminated, but you come up with a really nice, really clean coffee for the drying phase, right? So this is also important. This is the technology, that we have. It's called EcoMill. All right, and we are now in practice number 7. Dry the parchment coffee until it reaches 10 to 12% humidity. This is something where we still find a lot of people that are failing. Sometimes they go through 13 because they don't know exactly when to stop the drying. Or if you overdry, so you are like 9%, 8% humidity, you are losing money because you are not getting paid for that loss of coffee, right? So basically what we came out with the idea, it's called Gravimet. So basically what you do, you take a little sample of the coffee that you already washed, that you have ready for drying, and you put it in this canister, and then you weigh 200 grams of that, right? You take then the canister and you put it on the coffee that you're drying, and you leave it in there. Again, once in a while you come, you take and you weigh the canister with the coffee that was already in there. When the weight of the coffee in there is about 104, 105 grams, then you're ready. You're going to be here. Chances of being mistaken, 5%. All right? So it's very simple, but it's taking your coffee into a next level, right? A level of high quality. So let me show you this. We just went through the country, asked many different farmers to tell us how were they doing with these 7 practices, the 7P. So basically what you have is people from Huila, from different parts of Colombia, right? And we also try different varieties. What's going on when you use Castillo variety, or when you use Cenicafe or Tabi? Is there any difference? So let me show you what happened. This is the SCA score for the samples. This is the variation among the different samples. So basically what you see, we started with 81, but you can go to 83, 84, sometimes even more. So basically what this is showing us is that just following these 7 steps, which are very simple, that any farmer can do them, you can reach this level of quality of coffee, which is already really good, all right? And we haven't done anything strange. We are just doing the 7 practices, which are very simple, very easy to carry out. All right, so with this, I'm going to end the second part. I forgot that I was going to have some space, some room for questions before I go into the third part. So let me see. Has anybody any question at this point? Right. Can you help me with the microphone? Oh, there you go.
I'm Shirish Vijendra.
Yeah, you can raise your hand. Mic alone kodi. Kindly on the mic, please. Yeah. Yeah, it's on. Sir, you can speak. It's on.
Hello. I'm Shirish Vijendra, a grower from Chikmagalur, Karnataka. Dr. Alvaro, you mentioned about Colombia getting rain throughout the year. Don't you need a stress period for the coffee to flower? That is one of my questions. And the second question is, which is the variety of Arabica you use most for growing? The majority varietal in Arabica. And which is doing well, which is leaf rust resistant? Thank you.
Can you repeat the first one?
Sorry?
First question?
The first question is, you said Colombia has rain throughout the year. don't you need a stress period for the flowering of the plants?
Yes. Okay, that's a very good question. We suffer every year for that, right? We're asking for some 10 days where we don't have rain, so we have a stress on the plant, and then we can have the flowering, right? It happens, right? It's not. That's why I'm telling you. It's not as we don't have dry periods like you guys here, which are really strong. We have really short dry periods, but pretty soon we have rain again. So we do have those. As a matter of fact, when you're drying coffee under the sun, you are like this all the time. Like you are checking because you don't know when the rain is going to come, right? It doesn't happen probably here. So that's the first thing. Now, the second one, right now, 85% of the coffee area in Colombia is planted with resistant varieties, with 85%. So 85% out of 150,000 hectares, right? So basically, what we have in that 85%, we have Castillo, we still have some Colombia, which is the old variety, and we are getting now Cenicafe Uno. So basically, those are the three varieties, and today Castillo is the one that is taking the charge, right? 50% of the plantations, they have Castillo variety. But we are moving into the next one, which is Cenicafe Uno. All right, one more? Yes.
Hi, I'm Sriramlu from RS Agro Estates, Kodaikanal. You were talking about the drying process. What happens if to the cupping score when the drying is more than required? So the moisture content reduces below 10%.
Yeah. So basically, when it's below 10%, you can have two effects. One is, okay, the first one is the one that I told you. Money. You're losing money, right? 1% of your weight is gone, or 2%. That's gone. Now, there is another thing that is that when you over-dry the beans, when the roasters are working in the roasting process, that lack of water is going to cause something that is called caramelization. So you don't have all the Maillard reactions that you normally have when you are between 10 and 12%, right? So you can lose some quality if you lose water in the bean. All right. One more, and I'm going to continue for the final one.
My name is Balaji from Tamil Nadu. Actually, you are getting the throughout the rain. So how it is going to affect the brick score and the quality of the cafe?
How it's going to affect what? Excuse me.
Brick score. Sweetness of the fruit.
Ah, the bricks, yeah. Well, we heard a lot of things about the bricks, called those bricks degrees. That's the way we call them in Colombia. But the thing is this. The bricks are measuring the amount of, let's say, of particles that are present in, let's say, in the water solution of the coffee cherry. So sometimes people pay a lot of attention to bricks, and what you notice when you have the development of the cherry is that at some point it has like the highest weight when it has a lot of water, and then it starts to lose water, right? So people say, oh, I'm increasing the bricks degrees. Basically, it's the same. It's just that you're reducing the water, and you see a little bit more of particles in there, right? So at this point, we don't pay a lot of attention to bricks degrees because actually it's like not telling us a lot of things or things that are key for us in order to process coffee. All right, so I'm going to start now with the third part. And the part I put it this name, the brave and the rewarded. And this is something that we see today. You already know how is the standard procedure that we have to process coffee in Colombia, right? You know now the 7 practices. This is what we recommend everybody to do. But people will like to differentiate their coffees. It's like, I don't want to be like everybody else. I want to do something else. And that's when you start to do, in some cases, crazy things. In some cases, things that probably are going to take you a lot of time and effort in order to increase the quality of your coffee or differentiate your coffee from what everybody else is doing. So let's start talking about this because it's an area where a lot of innovation is going on. All right, so this is like a summary of what we have been talking today here. You have harvesting, you have the coffee growing in there, you have the harvesting, you collect do the pulping, do the fermentation, you dry the coffee, and the coffee is ready, right? So in Colombia, any variation that right now is very focused on this part. We have this complex transformation of the mucilage going on in there due to microorganisms, right? So normally what we tell people that they are doing, they are doing spontaneous fermentation. It's like I just take the cherries, do the pulping, and put them in there, and they start doing the fermentation by themselves, right? That's a spontaneous fermentation. So people say, you know what? Probably I can change things here. So fermentation is something that you should be a little bit careful of, right? First thing, fermentation is very well known in certain business. In this case of wine, for example, 10 to 5,000 years ago, people have been doing fermentation. In the case of beer, 8 to 4,000 years. You see, in cocoa, you have 3,000 years. But in coffee, something that is really new. We just have like very few years working on coffee fermentation, right? So it's something that we're still going into there, trying to understand what is happening. And I have this picture here of two of our scientists, because right now what I'm going to show you here has to do a lot with the work of Valentina and Aida, which I'm going to present to you today. So at this point, and I'm sorry, I'm going to start showing some graphics and some data, because I want you guys to have a clear idea of what are we seeing in this modification of the fermentation process. All right, so basically what you do during fermentation, well, first, you have to check on the quality of the raw material. I already mentioned, you have to remove the floats. You have to keep, bring healthy beans into the process, right? Then you do all these process conditions, the 7 practices, but something else, right? And then the idea is if I do this, I shall perceive some changes, right? Because if I do a lot of changes, a lot of different things, and I end up with the same thing that the next guy who is doing the 7 practices, then what was the idea of doing all this, right? So I must come up with some changes that are really important, okay? All right, so what happens here? I do this process, and in the fermentation, basically what is going to happen is first, I'm going to degrade the mucilage, which is the main purpose, right? I am also going to have a lot of microbial growth in there, many different bacteria and yeast growing in there. They are going to start using different substrates that are present. They are going to increase the temperature of the mass that I'm fermenting. They are going to increase the acidity. And at the end, I can produce some other molecules that were not there at the beginning. Alcohols, acids, some other, right? So all these things are happening during the fermentation. All right, so I'm going to have the normal standard procedure once more. You do the harvesting, you do this water classification, you do the pulping. In many cases, we recommend to do the size classification. Then you do the fermentation, look at the Fermaestro here. Then I do the washing, again, bean classification, and then I do the drying. Every time I mention classification, again, it means that I'm removing something from the mass, and I'm just keeping something good in, afterwards, all right? Okay, so what is one of the first things people change? They want to classify by color. That's one of the first things. All right, and the other one, here in the standard procedure, what happens if I modify the time of fermentation? What is going to happen? Is it going to improve or not? Or what if I change the temperature or whatever is going on in there, right? Those are the basic changes that we see people doing everywhere. Let's look a little bit into that. So for the colors, we came up with this idea which is called Chroma Café. Chroma Café is this set of cards with different shades or colors based on the ripening of the red fruits, right? This is important because every time you want to repeat a process, you need to have a reference. If I say, my coffee, my farm, I like to process the cherries that are between 5 and 6. Well, when you have the Chroma Café, you can do it today, you can do it tomorrow, you can do it in 2 months, because basically you just use the reference and you separate the colors and you take the same colors always, right? So that's what you notice. You can start doing this selection, and this is happening in some farms. You have people there doing the selection. Again, you want to be able to repeat results, and that's why it's important to have a reference. In our case, the reference is called Chroma Cafe, all right? Okay. So one of the things that we did was, okay, let's do it. Let's try to have 85% of the mass that I'm going to process, look at this, less than 25% of greens, right? But I want to have the different masses with different colors. Let's see what happens. What if I choose this one, or I only choose this one, or what happens if I choose this one, right? So we did it. We separated with the colors, with the Chroma Cafe. We enriched the masses with different ripening stages. And this is what you get. This is the SCA score. The only thing we did different was to separate colors, right? The rest is the 7 practices. So you see, this is the average SCA score that we got from the samples, which is pretty good, right? Considering that you haven't done anything different rather than separate by colors. And look how the flavor description shows up. So you have a lot of caramel here, chocolate, dry fruits, frutals, citrics. Let me see here, citric, these yellow, blue ones, and there was spices, and then floral. So basically what we notice is it's a lot of work to end up with basically the same. So at this point, we don't recommend to do this extra selection, right? That's what we recommend. It depends, it's up to you guys to do it, but basically it's not like you are going to notice a big change in whatever you're getting at the end. All right. Second thing, what happens if I change the fermentation time? So in our case, the reference for us is Fermaestro. When Fermaestro is telling us that I should stop, that will be my reference, right? So when I do that, 100% of the cups came out without any defects, all right? That's showing again how Fermaestro is working. Now, we cannot answer at this point how many cups were better than Fermaestro because these are the Fermaestro samples, so 0. Okay, so what we did, what about if we leave a little bit of mucilage without being degraded? How much? We have 100%, so the whole mucilage is there, 75%, 50%, 25% of the mucilage. Look at what happened here. Cups without defects, only 50%. 78%, 60%, 33%. So this is something that we don't recommend to do it, right? Because you have a big chance that whatever is coming out of there is going to have these defects. Of course, in this case, 22% of the samples were good, right? But I wouldn't like to bet on a process where I have 78% of chances of losing, right? So that's something that we do not recommend. How many cups were better than Fermaestro? Only 25%, 22, 33, 22. So you risk a lot to earn just a little bit, right? That's something that you have to keep in mind because we are talking about the honey processing, okay? All right, so what happens if I wait and after Fermaestro tells me that I have to stop, I leave it in there for a little bit longer? Fermentation time. So this is what happens. You see here, Fermaestro plus 2 hours. Fermaestro plus 4, plus 6, plus 8 hours. Number of cups, percentage of cups without defects, 89%, 100%, 100%, 89%. It's way safer to do a process like this, right? How many times I got cups that were better than Fermaestro? 56%, 42, 56, 42. All right? So again, if you ask me where I would like to bet in order to change the traditional 7 practices and do something else, something different, for sure I will go for this, right? Because I have more chances of getting better results. All right? Okay. So let's talk a little bit about temperature. Temperature is a factor that is really hard to control. Coffee beans are not really good transferring heat from one to another. So in our case, what we do is we do this in an experimental way. We have to use a bioreactor, which is here. You can put 30 liters there. That's the volume. And then you can control the temperature with this machine. You can reduce normally the temperature because remember that in the fermentation, temperature goes up, right? So what happens? The first thing is the acidity. What happens with the acidity? Well, the pH normally starts here and it goes down. No matter what you do, pH always goes down. So if somebody's telling you that you should keep the pH at a certain level, that's really tough to do because bacteria and yeast, they just regulate the system. So this is what happens. If I do the fermentation, normally what we call a spontaneous fermentation, look at this is the final pH at 15 degrees, at 30 degrees. Basically it's the same. So the reaction just goes until it reaches this level here of about 3.54 in the acidity level, okay? All right, so what happens? We take many samples. We run what we call the control. The controls are here. Some of those we did the fermentation at 15 degrees, in other cases 30 degrees, right? And we did it with 3 different varieties, Castillo, Senicafe, and Tabi. So let's see what happened. So you have here the control. So you start to see in some cases some increase in the quality of the coffee. This is the SCA score. You see that we are in about 82, 83, some cases 84, right? But it's kind of hard to see, what are you getting out of there? So let me show you the next slide. Oh, this is the maximum value that we got, by the way. So you see that in some cases, we were able to reach 85. You see a big difference here. So, it's appealing to try to do something like this if you're going to start getting extra score points in the SCA score. So basically, this is what happens when you ask what percentage of the samples were better in the treatment than with the control. Look at this. In some cases, 80% of the samples were a little better. Unsure? 5 minutes? Okay, I'm going to finish. So basically what you see here is that you can get some extra points just because of that. All right, so I'm going to just move over here to show you how complex this can get. You can take, for example, the process here, do the pulping, batch mixing, which we say that is kind of hard, and then you can do the fermentation. You can take the water classification and do the fermentation in the cherry, and then going into the pulping, and then going all the way down. But you can also take the sample here, move it into a tank, and basically remove the oxygen, and finally do the washing. This is a fermentation without oxygen. Or you can do a double fermentation. You take the water, you do the fermentation here, you do a second fermentation. Not only that, you can come over here, just don't do the washing, do directly the drying. And look at this. You can add enzymes. We see people doing that. Add water. That's something that is also very common. Add the pulp to the fermentation tank. Add other microorganisms that were not present in there. And of course, this is something new, add some supplements. So basically, this is like, when I say the brave new world, is this. You see a lot of people trying different things at once. I'm going to jump over because I'm short of time. Basically, I was going to show you how things change a little bit when you do these procedures. But I'm going to move into this, into the final remarks. And I hope that you guys have a huge idea or a large idea of how is the quality, how is the concept, how are we moving into new qualities in coffee in Colombia. The first one, we have to build quality together. It's not only our responsibility as producers, doing the plant varieties, the environment, the farming, the harvesting, the processing. Well, we deliver that coffee and somebody has to store it, do the hulling, roasting, and packing. So that's out of our hands. And finally, somebody takes that and make a preparation of the beverage. So all of this is going to influence whatever you are drinking at home or in your business, right? So this, we have to do it together. It's not only our responsibility, it's the whole chain that goes in there. The second remark, when we talk about differentiated coffees, we can talk about varieties. We saw them today. We can talk about physical quality. For example, having bean sizes that are a little bit bigger or smaller, like the pea berries, right? You can have also the processing. We just saw some examples. The wash coffee, the honeys, the naturals. But also we have denomination of origin. We saw that today, regional or state origin. But also, and this is something that I didn't mention, the sustainability. You can have all this. So basically, when we talk about quality, about differentiated coffees, there is a whole world out there that we can actually explore and get, some extra money for that. And then I want to remind you this, that is the step-by-step development. It's not like if you are right now, you go home and you start doing the double fermentation, right? That's crazy. You have to start here. Get a good physical quality, get the variety, get the environment good, then obtain a clean cup. For example, you do in the 7 practices, and then you can start doing the modifications, right? All these different changes that you can implement in your farm. And this is important. Once the implementation is done, how can I repeat it? Not this year, next year, many different batches, because otherwise I cannot offer a product that is consistent, right? And then you can have this desired profile where you want to differentiate your coffee from everybody else. So to finish today, thank you very much to all of you for your attention. I would like to say this. I want you guys to be with me and let's share better coffees from around the world. Not only from Colombia, from many places, and we can have that pleasure every single day. Thank you very much.
Sir, kindly be here. Dr. Alvaro, kindly be seated. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, please note, Sri Alvaro will be available offline, and I think he'll interact with the people after the program. And kindly stay back. I would request Dr. Surya Prakash Rao, the former Director Research of Coffee Board and presently the Consultant of Research, to kindly felicitate Dr. Alvaro Gaitan Bustamante. Yes, Chapale Joragi Barli. I think I can see a lot of Kannadigas here, so please put your hands together.
Thank you. Okay, thanks.
So, thank you very much. The closing ceremony will happen here in the same venue at 5 o'clock. Other halls, if you're interested, as per your registration details, you can always attend the other sessions. So thank you very much. Namaskara. At 5 o'clock, the session will begin. Thank you. Take care.
Thank you.
Hello. 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 Hello.